Hi, welcome back to Science 1206, the motion unit. I'm Miss Ledwell, and in this video, we'll compare position time graphs and velocity time graphs. Let's get started. The first feature we'll look at is the x-axis and y-axis. On a position time graph, the independent variable is time, which is placed on the x-axis. The dependent variable is position, which is placed on the y-axis. On a velocity time graph, the independent variable is also time, which is placed on the x-axis, but the dependent variable is velocity, which is placed on the y-axis. Always begin by checking the labels on the axes. Are you examining a position time graph or a velocity time graph? This is important because things will look different depending on the type of graph. A position time graph looks like this, with the x-axis being time and the y being position. And our velocity time graph looks like this, with the x-axis also being time, but the y-axis being velocity. Our next feature is an object at rest. On a position time graph, an object at rest is represented by a straight horizontal line with zero slope. But on a velocity time graph, an object at rest is represented by a flat line segment along the x-axis lined up with zero, meaning the velocity is zero. Our graphs would look like this. Our position time graph, we have a horizontal line, which means a zero slope, a stationary object. And on a velocity time graph, if the object is not moving, it's stationary, the horizontal line is across the x-axis, lined up with zero. Our next feature is the slope of the line. On a position time graph, the slope of the line represents velocity. On a velocity time graph, the slope of the line is used to determine the acceleration of an object. So position time graph, if we calculate the slope, we'll get average velocity. And velocity time graph, if we calculate the slope, we will get acceleration. Our next feature is a horizontal line. On a position time graph, a straight horizontal line with zero slope means the object is stationary, it's not moving. But on a velocity time graph, a straight horizontal line indicates zero acceleration. The object is moving at constant velocity, unless that line is across the x-axis, of course. So here's our position versus time graph, and you can see that the straight horizontal line means zero slope, a stationary object. But on a velocity time graph, it means that the object is moving at constant velocity. So the object is moving. It's not stopped on a velocity time graph unless that line is across the x-axis. And this shows uniform motion. Our next feature is the area under the line. It's not used for position time graphs, but for velocity time graphs, the area under the line can be used to calculate the displacement of an object. And the graph would look like this. So the displacement would be the area under the line, and the area under the line depends on the shape that you have. In this case, it's a triangle. Area of a triangle is half the base times the height, and then you do your calculation to determine the displacement. Our next feature is a tangent line. On a position time graph, the slope of a tangent line represents instantaneous velocity. On velocity time graphs, this is not used. So for a position time graph where you're drawing a tangent line to determine the slope of the line and the instantaneous velocity, it would look like this. The purple line represents the tangent line, which is drawn against the curve line on the position time graph. Now it's time to review. Complete the learning activities you'll find in Brightspace.